Got shot and left in a wagon wreck. A cowboy carried her home and gave her healing hands. The wheel was still turning when I found her. Spinning slow in the air, that rear left wheel, nothing under it but canyon dust 30 feet down. The wagon was jackknifed on the lip of the grade, box caved in on one side, and the mules were gone, either cut loose by whoever did this or spooked off the edge. I didn't know yet. Didn't know much of anything except that I'd heard the shot from half a mile back and come up the switchback at a trot, because that's what you do when you hear a single shot and then nothing. Nothing is worse than the shot. The shot means something happened. Nothing means nobody's left to say what. I stepped down from the sorrel and looped her to a scrub cedar. Walked up to the wreck slow, checking the brush on both sides. The land out there was dry September, all cracked clay and greasewood, and you could hear a man walking if he wasn't particular about it. Whoever had been here was gone. The tracks said 4 horses in a hurry heading north. 2 of them had pulled the mules. I clocked all of that in about 20 seconds, and then I stopped clocking it because I heard her. Not a scream, not even a word. Just a sound a person makes when they're trying to breathe around something that's moved into the wrong place in their chest. A wet, careful sound, the kind you don't forget. She was under the driver's box, pinned by the seat board that had snapped down across her legs when the wagon canted. On her side, one arm trapped beneath her, the other pressed flat against her belly. Brown hair loose and matted. Dress was blue once, maybe, hard to say. The blood was on her left side, just above the hip. A bullet does a particular thing when it goes in at that angle. It doesn't stay where it entered. I'd seen enough of them to know she was in serious trouble, and I'd seen enough to know that panicking about it wouldn't help her any. "Hey," I said, just that. She opened her eyes. Gray, clear even then, that surprised me. "You with the ones that did this?" Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. "No." She looked at me for a moment. That particular way a person looks when they're deciding whether to trust the only option they've got. "Then get this board off me," she said. I did. It took some doing. The board had the full weight of the seat housing on it, and the wagon was shifting on the grade, threatening to go over if I put my weight wrong. I worked the back end first, got a rock under it, then levered it up from the middle and dragged it clear. She didn't make a sound while I did it. Her legs were bruised bad, but nothing broken. I got my hands under her arms and moved her back from the wagon before I did anything else, because I didn't want to be crouched over her when that thing decided to finish rolling. 20 seconds later it did. Went over the edge with a long grinding sound and a crash at the bottom that scattered birds for a quarter mile. She watched it go. "That was everything I owned," she said. "Almost everything," I said, and she looked at me then like she didn't know what to make of that. I didn't explain it. I got the canteen off the sorrel and gave her water first, small sips. She wanted more, and I told her she'd keep the small sips down and regret the large ones, and she didn't argue. I got my bedroll and spread the top blanket on the ground and helped her onto it. She hissed when I moved her. The bullet was still in her, I could tell by the way the wound was sitting, no exit on the back side that I could find when I checked, careful and quick. "I need to look at this," I said. "You a doctor?" "No. You done this before." "Enough times to know what I'm doing, and not enough to be casual about it." She seemed to think that was the right answer. She turned her face away and stared at the sky and let me work. "I'll tell you something about those next 30 minutes that I've never told anybody. Not because it's the kind of thing a man brags on, but because it's the kind of thing a man carries. The wound was bad. The bullet had angled in and stopped somewhere in the soft tissue above her hip, deep, but not so deep I couldn't reach it with the probe I made from a piece of wire off the wrecked wagon's rigging. I cleaned everything I could clean. I packed the wound with cloth cut from the cleanest part of my undershirt. I wrapped it tight enough to matter and loose enough not to kill her. She didn't cry. Twice she made that sound again, the breathing around it sound, and once she grabbed my wrist and held it hard for about 10 seconds, her eyes shut, knuckles white, and then she let go and I kept working. When it was done, I sat back on my heels and my hands were shaking. Not from the work. I don't know why exactly. Something about a person trusting you with the worst moment they've ever been in. It gets into you somewhere. "Thank you," she said to the sky. "Don't thank me yet. You've got a few days of bad ahead of you." "Did you get it out?" "I did." "Then thank you yet," she said. And something in the way she said it, no performance to it, just flat and true, I had to look away for a second. Her name was Clara Ness. She'd been 3 days out of Benson, heading north to meet a cousin who had land near the Gila. The men who stopped the wagon had taken the strongbox she was carrying, her dead husband's tools and his savings, the whole of what she was bringing to start over. She told me this in pieces, the way people do when they're using the talking to get through the pain, not asking for sympathy, just accounting. I had a camp about 4 miles back, down in a draw off the main trace where there was water and a decent windbreak. I'd been using it 3 nights running while I worked the canyon country for strays, a contract job for a rancher named Prout whose cattle had a habit of walking into rough country and forgetting how to walk back out. The camp was nothing much, a fire ring, a canvas lean-to, my gear. But it had what she needed, which was shelter and a place to lie still. Getting her there was its own ordeal. I'd have put her on the sorrel, but she couldn't sit a horse with a wound like that, not for 4 miles of rough trace. I went back for the horse and came back with a hackamore lead and spent the better part of an hour cutting enough scrub timber to rig a drag, 2 poles, my bedroll and saddle blanket lashed between them. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. I walked the sorrel slow, and she rode the drag and stared up at the sky the whole way and didn't complain once. I mention that because it's worth mentioning. A person in that much pain dragged over that ground for 4 miles. She didn't complain. The sun was getting low when we made camp. I got a fire going and got water heating before I did anything else. She was feverish by then, not bad yet, but starting. I got her onto the bedroll inside the lean-to and changed the dressing. The first packing had done its job, the bleeding had slowed to almost nothing, and covered her with the second blanket. She was shaking a little. I put my coat over the blanket, and she looked up at me when I did that and didn't say anything, but her hand came up and touched my forearm for just a moment. The lightest thing, like she was just making sure I was real. I made broth from the last of my jerky stock and a handful of dried onion I had in the pack. Nothing that would win a prize. She got half of it down and kept it. I took that as good news and let her sleep. I sat by the fire and did the thinking I hadn't had time to do yet. 4 men heading north with her mules and her strongbox. They'd left her for dead, which meant they weren't overly worried about being followed or reported. That told me something about the kind of men they were and the kind of country they figured they were operating in. Out there you could leave a woman gut-shot in a wrecked wagon and reasonably expect that by the time anybody found her there'd be nothing left to report. Buzzards and time take care of everything. Except I'd come along, I thought about that. The particular sequence of things that had to be true for me to be on that switchback at that moment, Prout's stray cattle, the 3 nights camped in that draw, the shot I'd heard, the direction I'd come from. You pull one of those out and she's dead by morning. I'm not a man who puts much stock in the idea that things happen for a reason. But sometimes the arithmetic of a thing just sits in your chest and you can't quite shake it. She slept fitfully. I put wood on the fire twice. Around midnight she woke up and I gave her water and she asked me my name. Calhoun, I said. Dill Calhoun. Dill, she said like she was testing it. That's a name somebody thought about. My mother did. I had less to say about it. She almost smiled. Her fever was up a little, but she was clear-eyed, which was the thing I was watching for. High and clear is manageable. High and confused is when you start to worry. Where were you headed, she asked, before? Nowhere specific. Got a job finishing up. After that, I don't know. She looked at the fire for a while. The coals had gone red and the wood was burning down to a good steady heat, the kind that lasts. I used to envy people like that, she said. Men who could just go nowhere specific. There's less to it than it sounds like. I know, she said. I know there is now. She was quiet a moment. My husband, he always had a plan, next county, next season, next thing, 12 years of next things. She said it without bitterness. Just like she was laying something out to look at. He was a good man. He just kept thinking the good part of it was around the next bend. Was it? He died before we found out. I didn't say anything to that because there wasn't anything to say. After a minute she closed her eyes and went back to sleep, and I banked the fire and sat against the cedar post of the lean-to, and dozed with one ear open the way you learn to after enough years of sleeping in open country. The second day was the hard one. Fever spiked in the morning, bad enough that she was talking to people who weren't there for a while, her husband, I think, and somebody named Ruth, maybe a sister. I changed the dressing again. The wound looked clean, which was more than I'd dared to hope. No red streaking, no heat beyond what the fever itself was putting out. I kept water in her. Got more broth down her around noon, cool this time because hot food and a high fever is a fight in the wrong direction. I didn't leave camp that second day. Prute's cattle could wait. A man who leaves a sick woman alone in the desert because he's got a contract to finish is a particular kind of man, and I'd made my peace a long time ago with not being that kind. I had a small stock of herbs in my kit, not because I'm any kind of healer, but because you spend enough years alone in rough country and you start paying attention to what works. Yarrow for the wound, willow bark for the fever. I'd carried both so long they were just part of the kit, like the wire and the awl and the 3-inch blade. I made a poultice from the yarrow and laid it against the dressing and made a tea from the willow bark and got most of a cup into her over the course of the afternoon. By evening her fever had broken, not gone but broken the difference between a flood and a rising creek. She was wet with it and exhausted and more herself. "You're still here," she said, like she'd half expected me not to be. "I'm still here." She looked at the lean-to ceiling, just the canvas grayed with use, a couple of places where the light came through in thin lines. "You lost work on account of me," she said. "The cattle will still be lost tomorrow. They're patient that way. What do you make for a job like that?" I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I had 4 times that in the strongbox." "I know, you told me." I wasn't saying it like that. I just meant," she stopped, started again. "I'm not a woman who can't pay her way is what I'm saying. When I'm back on my feet, I want you to know that." I looked at her. This woman, 2 days off a bullet, no possessions, sick as she'd probably ever been in her life. And the thing she wanted me to understand was that she wasn't going to be a burden. I didn't know what to do with that exactly. After a moment I just said, "All right." She held my eyes for a second and then looked back at the ceiling, and the tension went out of her shoulders and she slept again. That night I thought about my father. I don't know why I hadn't thought about him in years, really thought about him. He'd been a particular kind of man, not hard in the mean way, but in the spare way. He didn't give you words if a look would do. He didn't give you help if you hadn't tried first. But when you had tried and come up short, he was there. Not announcing it, not standing over you about it. Just there. I'd spent most of my adult life thinking I'd grown up to be something different, more restless, less rooted. No land, no particular woman, no particular place, just the work and the moving. I used to think that was freedom. I don't know what I thought it was now. I got up before first light and went down to the creek and washed up and came back and built the fire. She was awake when I got back, sitting up on her own for the first time, the coat still across her shoulders. "Morning," she said. "How do you feel?" She considered it, like I was shot and dragged through a desert, but better than yesterday. "That's the right direction." I made coffee, real coffee. I had about 4 days of it left and I'd been nursing it, but it seemed like the right morning to stop nursing it. She wrapped both hands around the cup and breathed the steam and closed her eyes for a moment, and I don't think I've ever seen a person look that relieved by a cup of coffee. "Dill," she said. "Why haven't you asked me anything?" I looked at her. "About what?" "About where I'm really going, what I'm really running from, whether there's somebody looking for me. Whether those men, whether they had a reason." She said it level, watching me. "Did they?" "Number wrong place, right strongbox." "Then there's nothing to ask." She was quiet, turned the cup in her hands. "Most men would have asked." "Most men ask things because they're deciding something," I said. "I already decided." She looked at me then, really looked. The way a person looks when something you said landed somewhere they didn't expect. I didn't look away from it. I let her look. The 3rd day she was up and moving. Not far, not for long, she'd walk to the creek and back, and that was the limit of what she had. But she was up, and the color was coming back, and she was eating. I'd managed to get a rabbit that morning, and I made a proper stew, and she ate 2 full helpings and said it was the best thing she'd tasted in a year, which I didn't believe but appreciated. She asked me to show her what I'd done with the wound dressing, how to change it, how to check the yarrow poultice. Said she'd need to know once I wasn't there. I showed her, walked her through it. She had steady hands. Watched everything once and then did it herself the 2nd time exactly right. "You'd have made a good field surgeon," I said. "I'd have made a good a lot of things," she said, not bitter, just factual. "Life didn't ask. It's asking now." She looked at me from the other side of the fire, the afternoon light low and amber through the cedars. "Maybe," she said, and left it there. On the 4th day I rode out and worked Prute's cattle. Found 11 head in a box canyon 2 miles east, exactly where they'd been heading all week, and pushed them back toward the main range and was back in camp by mid-afternoon. She'd cleaned the camp while I was gone. Restacked the wood, organized the pack gear, swept the Linta floor, the hard-packed dirt so smooth she'd clearly used a cedar branch to do it. There was fresh water in the pot, and she'd made some kind of flat bread from the flour I had in the kit, cooked it on the flat rock beside the fire. She was sitting with her back against a cedar, mending one of my spare shirts. She'd found my kit needle and thread and just gone ahead and done it. The shirt had a rip in the left shoulder I'd been intending to fix for about 6 weeks. I stood at the edge of camp and looked at all of this and felt something shift in my chest. I didn't have a name for it right then. I'm not sure I do now. "You didn't have to do any of this," I said. "I know," she bit the thread and smoothed the mend with her thumb. "That's why I did it." I put the sorrel up and washed up at the creek and came back and ate the flat bread, which was plain and good. We sat by the fire in the way that people do when they've been in close quarters through something hard, not needing to fill the quiet, but not uncomfortable in it either. The particular ease that comes not from knowing a person a long time, but from knowing them in the right circumstances. "I want to ask you something," she said after a while. "All right. The cousin I was going to, he's a decent man, but there's nothing there really, not for me. A room and a job keeping his books, and that's the shape of it." She looked at the fire. "I was going because I didn't know what else to do, that's all." I waited. "I don't know what else to do now either," she said, "except I know a little more about what I don't want." I picked up a stick and pushed a coal back into the fire ring. Let the quiet sit for a moment. "Where does Prute's land run to?" I said. "I don't know Prute. North Range borders a piece of creek bottom that's been sitting empty 3 years. Good grass, decent water. He's been after me to take a seasonal contract for the past 2 years, a permanent hand instead of piecework. Cabin needs work, but it's standing." I looked at her. "I keep saying I'll think about it." She looked at me for a long moment. The fire between us, the cedar smell, the first stars coming up over the rim. "That sounds like a man who keeps moving," she said. "It does," I said. "I don't know what it sounds like to the man who stops." She was quiet, then she said, "What does it sound like to you?" I thought about it. I'm not a man who says things before he's thought them out. I take the time, even when the time is a little uncomfortable. "It sounds like something worth trying," I said, "if a person had a reason." She looked at me then, and the look was plain. No performance to it, same as the thank you on the first day, just direct. "Then I'm saying I could be a reason," she said, "if you're saying what I think you're saying." "I am." She held that for a moment. Then she reached across and took my hand, not soft, not tentative, just took it the way you take a thing you mean to keep, and she looked at me in the firelight like she was seeing something she recognized. Something she'd maybe been looking for long enough to know it when she found it. I looked back at her. Her face was still tired, still had the bruise along her cheekbone from the wreck, still had the hollow under her eyes from 4 days of fever, and she was looking at me like I was solid ground. I'll tell you, I'd been a lot of things in my life. Hired hand, straight chaser, line rider, occasional fool. Nobody had ever looked at me quite like that, like I was enough, like I was, in fact, exactly what was needed. I didn't squeeze her hand. I just let her hold it, and I let myself be held. After a while, she said, "You're going to have to tell me more about this cabin." "It needs a new floor in the back room," I said. "Roof solid, walls are stone, springs about 40 yards from the front step." 40 yards is close. "It is." "What's the range like?" "Good grass in spring and summer. Winters are hard, but not impossible." She nodded like she was making a calculation. "And Prute, he's fair." "Fair enough, he doesn't promise what he can't give." "That's the most I'd ask of any man," she said. And then quieter, "of any situation." I understood she wasn't just talking about the rancher. "Then we'll go see him," I said, "when you're up for the ride." "Give me 2 more days," she said. "I'll be up for the ride in 2 days." She was right. She was right about the 2 days. On the morning of the 6th day, I broke camp and we rode out together, her on the sorrel and me on foot leading, because 4 miles of easy ground was nothing to me, and the horse needed to carry her steady. Halfway there, she told me to get up behind her and stop being dramatic about it. I got up behind her and we rode double, and neither one of us said much for the last 2 miles. The high desert still cool in the morning, and the light coming up gold and long over the rim to the east. Prout was in his yard when we rode in. He's a straight-built man, Prout, not much given to surprise. He looked at the two of us for a moment and then looked at me. "You find what you were looking for?" he said. He meant the cattle. I'd left him a note in the split cedar post at the trailhead, 11 head, Box Canyon East, pushed toward the North Range. "Found what I was looking for," I said. He looked at Clara. She looked at him with that steady gray look of hers. "She needs a bed and a doctor," I said. "Took a bullet 5 days ago, wounds clean, but she needs a doctor to say so." "My wife'll get the doctor sent for," Prout said, and went inside to do it, and it was as simple as that. Clara Ness stayed at Prout's for 4 days while the doctor confirmed what I already knew. The wound was clean and healing straight. And while I made the 2-day ride out to the empty cabin on the North Range and spent those 2 days putting the new floor in the back room and patching a place on the linta where the wind came through and clearing the brush from around the spring, so the path was clean. I'm not a man who tells you what something meant to me. I'd rather show you the floor. When I brought her out to the cabin the first time, she walked through every room slow, not saying anything. Ran her hand along the stone wall. Looked out the back window at the grass going yellow in the late September light. Stood in the back room and looked down at the new floor. "Cottonwood," she said. "Cottonwood, it's what I had." "It'll do," she said, and turned and looked at me in the doorway. She still got that look. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what it is. A woman who's looked at you out of the worst thing that ever happened to her and decided you were worth staying for, that look doesn't go away. Some mornings I catch it across the breakfast table just for a second before she looks back down at whatever she's doing. And I take it in and I go back to what I'm doing and I know where I am. I know exactly where I am. That's the whole of it, no grand conclusion to put on it. The floor's cottonwood and the springs 40 yards from the front step. And in the morning when the light comes up long over the rim, she's got her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, and she's looking out toward the east pasture, thinking her thoughts, and I'm thinking mine. And that is, I'll tell you, quite a lot.